ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Namaste, my dear friends. This is video number 32 on Talks with Maharshi Ramana. This video starts with talk number 447. Sri Bhagwan said that a saint Nama Shivaya, who was formerly living in Arunachala, must have undergone considerable difficulties, for he has sung a song saying, God proves the devotees by means of severe ordeals. A washerman beats the cloth on a slab not to tear it but only to remove the dirt. 25th January 1938, talk number 448. Literal translation of Namdev's philosophy of the divine name. Number 1. The name permeates densely the sky and the lowest regions and the entire universe. Who can tell to what depths in the nether regions and what height in the heavens it extends? The ignorant undergo the 84 lakhs of species of births, not knowing the essence of things. Namdev says that name is immortal, forms are innumerable, but the name is all that. 2. The name itself is form, and form itself is name. There is no distinction between name and form. God became manifest and assumed name and form. Hence the name the Vedas have established. Beware, there is no mantra beyond the name. Those who say otherwise are ignorant. Namdev says that the name is Kesava himself. There is known only this is known only to the loving devotees of the Lord. 3. The all-pervading nature of the name can only be understood when one recognizes his I. When one's own name is not recognized, it is impossible to get the all-pervading name. When one knows oneself, that one finds the name everywhere. To see the name as different from the named creates illusion. Namdev says, ask the saints. 4. None can realize the name by practice of knowledge, meditation, or austerity. Surrender yourself first at the feet of the Guru and learn to know that I myself is that name. After finding the source of that I, merge yourself individuality in that oneness which is self-existent and devoid of all duality, that which pervades beyond Dvaita and Dvaitatita. That name has come into the three words. The name is Prabrahman itself, where there is no action arising out of duality. When Sri Bhagwan had read this, a certain musician came into the hall and began to sing Tyagaraja Kirtanas in Telugu. One of them says, find the source of the sound which is transcendental, Mooladhara Sabda, by diving deep like a pearl diver diving for pearls. Then again another song was for a man who has controlled his mind. Where is the use of tapasya? Give up I am the body idea and realize I am not Thou art all. This song was translated to Mr. ZD, who was then in the hall. Mr. ZD asked, is it necessary to control one breath? What becomes of the man who has not practiced breath control? Maharshi replies, breath control is only an aid for diving deep. One may as well dive down by control of mind. On the mind being controlled, the breath becomes controlled automatically. One need not attempt breath control, mind control is enough. Breath control is recommended for the man who cannot control his mind straightway. Na ahem, I am not this, corresponds to Rechaka. Koham, who am I? Search for the I, corresponds to Purka. Soham, he am I. The self alone corresponds to Kumbhaka. So these are the functions of pranayama. Again the three formulae are na ahem not I, ka ahem who I, sa ahem he I. Delete the prefixes and hold on to the common factor in all of them, that is ahem, I. That is the gist of the whole matter. Later on, Sri Bhagwan referred to the songs and said, Tyagaraja says, well, the mind should be controlled. The question arises, what is mind? He himself answers in the next couplet, saying that it is the I am the body idea. The next question is how the control is effected. He answers again, saying, by complete surrender, realize that I am not and that all is He. The song is fine and compact. He also mentions the other method, namely control of breath. 31st January 1938, talk number 449. After, after Mr. GD had left, there was some reference to his visit to the ashramam. Sri Bhagwan remarked, some Shakti draws people from all parts of the globe to the center. A devotee aptly said that Shakti is not different from Sri Bhagwan. Sri Bhagwan immediately remarked, what Shakti drew me here originally? The same Shakti draws all others as well. Sri Bhagwan was happily in the mood to relate the following stories. Number 1. There was king with a devoted queen. She was a devotee of Sri Rama and yearned that her husband should similarly be a devotee. One night she found that the king mumbled something in his sleep. She kept her ears close to his lips and heard the word Rama repeated continually as in Japa. She was delighted and the next day ordered the minister to hold a feast. The king, having partaken of the feast, asked his wife for an explanation. She related the whole occurrence and said that the feast was in gratitude to God for the fulfillment of her long cherished wish. The king was, however, annoyed that his devotion should have been found out. Some say that having thus betrayed God, he considered himself unworthy of God and so committed suicide. It means that one should not openly display one's pity. We may take it that the king told the queen not to make a fuss over his pity, and they then lived happily together. Second, Thondaraji Dipodi, Bhakta Grahanum, Alvar, one who delights in the dust of the feet of devotees. A devotee of this name was keeping a plot of land in which he grew tulsi, the sacred basil, made garlands of it, and supplied the same to the god in the temple. He remained a bachelor and was respected for his life and conduct. One day, two sisters who lived by prostitution walked near the garden and sat under a tree. One of them said, "How disgusting is my life that I soil my body and mind every day. This man's life is most desirable." The other replied, "How do you know his mind? Maybe he is not as good as he appears to be. The bodily functions may be forcibly controlled, and that the mind may be reveling in righteous thoughts. One cannot control one's vasanas as easily as the physical frame." The former said, "The actions are only the indices of the mind. His life shows his mind to be pure." The other said, "Not necessarily. His mind has not been proved as yet." The first challenged her to prove his mind. She accepted. The second desired to be left alone with only a shred of garment in which to clothe herself. The first sister returned home, leaving the other alone with flimsy clothing. As the latter continued to remain under the tree, she appeared penitent and humble. The saint noticed her and approached her after some time. He asked what had happened to her that she looked so lowly. She pleaded penitence for her past life, desired to a purer and nobler life, and finished with a prayer to him to accept her humble services in the garden or attendance on himself. He advised her to return home and lead a normal life, but she protested. So he detained her for watering the tulsi plants. She accepted the function with delight and began to work in the garden. One rainy night, this woman was found standing under the leaves of thatched shed in which the saint was. Her clothes were dripping and she was shivering with cold. The master asked why she was in such a pitiable state. She said that her place was exposed to the rains, and so she sought shelter under the eaves, and that she would retire as soon as the rain ceased. He asked her to move into the hut and later told her to change her wet clothes. She did not have dry clothes to put on, so he offered her one of his own clothes. She wore it. Still later, she begged permission to massage his feet. He consented. Eventually, they embraced. The next day, she returned home, had good food, and wore fine clothes. She still continued to work in the garden. Sometimes she used to remain long in her home. Then this man began to visit her there until he finally lived with her. Nevertheless, he did not neglect the garden nor the daily garlands for God. There was public scandal regarding his change of life. God then resolved to restore him to his old ways and so assumed the shape of the saintly devotee himself. He appeared to the Dasi and secretly offered her a rich present, an anklet of gold. She was very pleased with it and hid it under her pillow. He then disappeared. All these were secretly observed by a maid servant in the house. The ornament was found missing in the temple. The worshipper reported the loss to the proper authorities. They offered a tempting reward for anyone who would give the clue for the recovery of the lost property. The maid servant afforded the clue and claimed the reward. The police recovered the ornament and arrested the Dasi, who said that the devotee gave her the same. He was then roughly handled. A supernatural voice said, I did it, leave him alone. The king and all others were surprised. They fell prostrate at the man's feet and set him free. He then led a better and nobler life. Number 3. Kodu Valley Siddhar was famed as a very austere hermit. He lived on the dry leaves fallen from trees. The king of the country heard of him, saw him, and offered a reward for the one who would prove this man's worth. A rich Dasi agreed to do it. She began to live near the recluse and pretended to attend on him. She gently left pieces of papadum along with the dry leaves picked by him. When he had eaten them, she began to leave other kinds of tasty food along with the dry leaves. Eventually, he took good, tasty dishes supplied by her. They became intimate and a child was born to them. She reported the matter to the king. The king wanted to know if she could prove their mutual relationship to the general public. She agreed and suggested a plan of action. Accordingly, the king announced a public dancing performance by that Dasi and invited the people to it. They gathered there and she also appeared, but not before she had given a dose of physic to the child and left it in the charge of the saint at home. The dance was at its height here. The child was crying at home for the mother. The father took the babe in his arms and went to the dancing performance. She was dancing hilariously. He could not approach her with the child. She noticed the man and the babe. She contrived to kick her legs in the dance so as to unloose one of her anklets just as she approached the place where the saint was. She gently lifted her foot and he tied the anklet. The public shouted and laughed, but he remained unaffected. Yet to prove his worth, he sang a Tamil song meaning, for victory, let go my anger. I release my mind when it rushes away. If it is true that I sleep day and night, quite aware of myself, may the stone burst into twain and become the wide expanse. Immediately the stone idol burst with a loud noise. The people were astounded. Sri Bhagwan continued, thus he proved himself an unswerving Jnani. One should not be deceived by the external appearance of Jnani. Thus Veda Chudamani. Its meaning is as follows. Although a Jivan Mukta associated with body may, owing to his prarabdha, appear to lapse into ignorance or wisdom, yet he is only pure like the ether, akasa, which is always itself clear, whether covered by dense clouds or cleared of clouds by currents of air. He always revels in the self alone, like a loving wife taking pleasure with her husband alone. Though she attends on him with things obtained from others by way of fortune as determined by her prarabdha, though he remains silent like one devoid of learning, yet his spineless supineness is due to the implicit duality of the Vakari Vak, spoken words of the Vedas. His silence is the highest expression of the realized non-duality, which is after all the true content of the Vedas. Though he instructs his disciples, yet he does not pose as a teacher in the full conviction that the teacher and disciple are mere conventions born of illusion, Maya, and so he continues to utter words like Akasvani. If, on the other hand, he mutters words incoherently like a lunatic, it is because his experience is inexpressible like the words of lovers in embrace. If his words are many and fluent like those of an orator, they represent the recollection of his experience, since he is the unmoving, non-dual one without any desire awaiting fulfillment. Although he may appear grief-stricken like any other man in bereavement, yet he evinces just the right love of the pity for the senses which he earlier controlled before he realized that they were mere instruments and manifestations of the Supreme Being. When he seems keenly interested in the wonders of the world, he is only ridiculing the ignorance born of superimposition. If he appears indulging in sexual pleasures, he must be taken to enjoy the ever inherent bliss of the self, which divided itself into the individual self and the universal self, delights in their reunion to regain its original nature. If he appears wrathful, he means well to the offenders. All his actions should be taken to be only divine manifestations on the plane of humanity. There should not arise even the least doubt as to his being emancipated while yet alive. He lives only for the good of the world. So Sri Bhagwan now warned the hearers against the mistake of disparaging a Jnani for his apparent conduct and again cited the story of Parikshit. He was a stillborn child. The ladies cried and appealed to Sri Krishna to save the child. The sages round about wondered how Krishna was going to save the child from the effects of the arrows. Apandasvastra of Aswasthama. Krishna said, if the child be touched by one eternally celibate Nitya Brahmachari, the child would be brought to life. Even Sukha dared not touch the child, Finding no one among the reputed saints bold enough to touch the child, Krishna went and touched it, saying, "If I am eternally celibate, Nitya Brahmachari, may the child be brought to life." The child began to breathe and later grew up to be Parikshit. Just consider how Krishna, surrounded by 16,000 gopis, is a brahmachari. Such is the mystery of Jivan Mukti. A Jivan Mukta is one who does not see anything separate from the self. If, however, a man consciously attempts to display siddhis, he will receive only kicks. 3rd February 1938, talk number 450. Miss Uma Devi, a Polish lady converted to Hinduism, asked Sri Bhagwan, "I once before told Sri Bhagwan how I had a vision of Shiva at about the time of my conversion to Hinduism. A similar experience recurred to me at Kot- Kottalam. These visions are momentary, but they are blissful. I want to know how they might be made permanent and continuous. Without Shiva, there is no life in what I see around me. I'm so happy to think of him. Please tell me how his vision may be everlasting to me." Bhagwan, Maharshi replied, "You speak of a vision of Shiva. Vision is always of an object. That implies the existence of a subject. The value of the vision is the same as that of the seer. That is to say, the nature of the vision is on the same plane as that of the seer. Appearance implies disappearance also. Whatever appears must also disappear. A vision can never be eternal, but Shiva is eternal. The Prataksha vision of Shiva to the eye signifies the existence of the eyes to see, the buddhi intellect lying behind the sight, the seer behind the buddhi and the sight, and finally the consciousness underlying the seer. This Prataksha vision is not as real as one imagines it to be, because it is not intimate and inherent. It is not first hand. It is the result of several successive phases of consciousness. Of these, consciousness alone does not vary, it is eternal. It is Shiva, it is the self. The vision implies the seer. The seer cannot deny the existence of the self. There is no moment when the self as consciousness does not exist, nor can the seer remain apart from consciousness. This consciousness is the eternal being and the only being. The seer cannot see himself. Does he deny his existence because he cannot see himself with the eyes as Pratyaksha in vision? No. So, Pratyaksha does not mean seeing but being. To be is to realize. Hence, I am that I am. I am is Shiva. Nothing else can be without him. Everything has its being in Shiva and because of Shiva. Therefore, inquire, who am I? Sink deep within and abide as the self. That is Shiva as being. Do not expect to have visions of him repeated. What is the difference between the object you see and Shiva? He is both the subject and the object. You cannot be without Shiva. Shiva is always realized here and now. If you think you have not realized him, it is wrong. This is the obstacle for realizing Shiva. Give up that thought also, and realization is there. Devotee. Yes, but how shall I effect it as quickly as possible? Maharshi. This is the obstacle for realization. Can there be individual without Shiva? Even now he is you. There is no question of time. If there be a moment of non-realization, the question of realization can arise. But as it is, you cannot be without him. He is already realized, ever realized, and never non-realized. Surrender to him and abide by his will, whether he appears or vanishes. Await his pleasure. If you ask him to do as you please, it is not surrender but command to him. You cannot have him obey you and yet think that you have surrendered. He knows what is best and when and how to do it. Leave everything entirely to him. His is the burden. You have no longer any cares. All your cares are his. Such is surrender. This is bhakti. Or inquire to whom these questions arise. Dive deep in the heart and remain as the self. One of these two ways is open to the aspirant. Sri Bhagwan also added, there is no being who is not conscious and therefore who is not Shiva. Not only is he Shiva, but also all else of which he is aware or not aware. Yet he thinks in sheer ignorance that he sees the universe in diverse forms, but if he sees himself, he is not aware of his separateness from the universe. In fact, individuality and the other entities vanish, although they persist in all their forms. Shiva is seen as the universe, but the seer does not see the background itself. Think of the man who sees only the cloth and not the cotton of which it is made of, or of man who sees the pictures moving on the screen in a cinema show and not the screen itself as the background, or again the man who sees the letters which he reads but not the paper on which they are written. The objects are thus consciousness and formed, but the ordinary person sees the objects in the universe but not Shiva in these forms. Shiva is the being assuming these forms and the consciousness seeing them. That is to say, Shiva is the background underlying both the subject and the object. And again, Shiva in repose and Shiva in action, or Shiva and Shakti, or the Lord and the universe. Whatever it is said to be, it is only consciousness, whether in repose or in action. Who is there that is not conscious? So, who is not realized? How then can questions arise doubting realization or desiring it? If I am not Pratyaksha to me, I can then say that Shiva is not Pratyaksha. These questions arise because you have limited the self to the body. Only then the ideas of within and without, of the subject and object arise. The objective visions have no intrinsic value. Even if they are everlasting, they cannot satisfy the person. Uma has Shiva always with her. Both together form Ardhanarishwara. Yet she wanted to know Shiva in his true nature. She made tapas. In her dhyana she saw a bright light. She thought this cannot be Shiva, for it is within the compass of my vision. I am greater than this light. So she resumed her tapas. Thoughts disappeared, stillness prevailed. She then realized that being is Shiva in his true nature. Muruganar cited a Parth stanza: to remove my darkness and give me light, the grace must work through me only. Sri Bhagwan mentioned Manik Vachagarj, we do, we do bhajana and the rest, but we have not seen nor heard of those who had seen thee. One cannot see God and yet retain individuality. The seer and the seen unite into one being. There is no cognizer nor cognition nor the cognized, all merge into one supreme Shiva only. So I end this wonderful video here. Please like, comment and share the video and subscribe the channel. Thanks a lot. Namaskar my dear friend. Next video number 33 will start with the talk number 451. Thanks. Namaskar.